On Christmas Eve, a single MOM arrives 30 minutes late. What the CEO revealed will amaze you. The snow fell relentlessly, transforming the streets into an icy labyrinth. Alissa gripped the steering wheel, fighting the determination to deliver a bright holiday for her kids with the stark reality of her situation. She'd saved every spare penny for weeks, every coupon, every late night, every sacrifice pulled into a vision of how Christmas morning would feel, the moments they'd share. Yet here she was, stuck in a dangerous winter storm that threatened not only her plans but also the fragile sense of pride she'd built around her life. Arriving 30 minutes late to the company holiday party, she stepped into a world of warm laughter and merry lights, feeling like a ghost among the glimmering joy. It was as if everyone had shifted from red and green cheer to whispers that hung in the air, slicing through her like icy shards. She scanned the room filled with her well-off colleagues, their eyes flickering over her before shifting back, indulging in the froth of their privileged discussions. The judgment was palpable. The weight of her working-class background bore down on her. Her heart raced, not just from the cold outside. She felt small and embarrassed, each whisper igniting fears deeper than the winter chill. What did it matter that she'd fought through the storm to be there? Did they even care? She wanted to retreat, to sip on a cup of holiday punch and slide back into the shadows, but she couldn't. She couldn't let her children down. They believed in her fight, even if the world often overlooked it. Before she could lose herself in despair, Jason, the CEO, took the stage, ready to speak about the company's charity funds. She felt a flicker of hope as he shared a heartfelt story about his single mother and the sacrifices she made. His voice was a lifeline, the bravery in his words crashing against the isolation she felt. Suddenly, he wasn't just a name on her payroll. He was a reminder that struggle could forge strength. Before she lost her nerve, she rose. Her palms were clammy and her stomach churned, yet the urge to speak surged through her. She had her own story, marked by early mornings and relentless nights, and she felt an awakening within her. I work hard not just out of necessity, but for my children's future, she said, her voice wavering but filled with resolve. As the hush hung in the air, her words evoked unexpected responses. She saw heads turn. Murmurs began to ripple through the gathering. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With each word, new emotions spiraled within her: an ache for acceptance, a hunger for validation, an urge to unshackle herself from the chains of doubt. As the conversation shifted, they took on a life of their own, dissecting the impact of class in the workplace, exposing the raw seams of privilege and merit. Yet amidst the cheering clamor, Alissa stepped outside and the snow hit her like a slap, stinging and biting. Doubts washed over her once more. She'd found her voice, yes, but would it change anything? Would that honesty reverberate in the hearts of her colleagues? The weight of uncertainty loomed large. Her next steps felt more daunting than ever. In the swirling snow, she faced the chilling truth, the lingering question of whether her voice could reclaim her dignity in a world that often overlooked those like her. What awaited her in the aftermath of this moment, she did not know. The icy wind bit at Alissa's cheeks, a stark contrast to the warmth she had just left behind. The vibrant chatter and bright lights of the holiday party felt like a distant memory now, an echo faded by the solitude of the winter night. She needed clarity in answer to the questions that swirled in her mind like the snowflakes around her. Turning away from the door, Alissa forged her own path through the snow, her boots crunching rhythmically beneath her. Each step was deliberate, a physical expression of her need to assert her place in a world that felt so often out of reach. The bitterness of the cold reminded her of the struggles she had endured, of raising her kids while juggling a demanding job, often feeling invisible in a sea of affluence. As she walked, the laughter and revelry melded into a blur, replaced by her inner thoughts. She could still see Jason's expression as he spoke, the conviction in his voice illuminating the room. In that moment, He had become a beacon of hope, but now she wrestled with doubt. Was she simply trying to carve a space for herself where it might not belong? Yet perhaps this moment was a turning point. It was time to embrace the potential that lay within her. Could she be the change she sought? Any hesitation felt like a hindrance, a chain binding her to a narrative she outgrew. No longer could she simply accept the societal narrative that labeled her as just a single mom. Determined, Alissa took a left toward the park, leaving the comfort of her colleagues' company and stepping into the rawness of the winter air. The need for a sense of purpose burned. She was more than an employee trying to make ends meet. She was a role model for her children and a voice for those who felt unheard. Her heart raced as she began to visualize a presentation of her own, one that would encapsulate her journey, the lessons she had learned, and her vision for the future. She could create a platform, share the narratives that often went untold, inspire others to action, and establish discussions around privilege and class. Focusing on her internal dialogue fueled her ambition. Thoughts of her children surged forth, their innocent faces lighting up at the sight of decorated presents, echoing laughter, and the smell of holiday cookies. Every effort she made was one more step toward giving them a life less burdened by financial strife. But she needed more than just dreams, she needed a plan. What would it look like to share her story? Initially, she imagined standing in front of her colleagues, but quickly realized that she needed a larger reach. Through a blog, social media, and maybe even a podcast, she could create an impact. A shaky commencement was better than inaction. The overwhelming desire to express her truth began to overwhelm her. As Alissa continued her trek, she caught sight of a nearby coffee shop, its windows glow inviting against the cold harshness outside. The warmth spilled out from it, as did the rich aroma of coffee that might stir her into action. She stepped inside, where the air was filled with the chatter of familiar types, the busy professionals, the baristas, and the few who dared to seek refuge from the wintry night. Settling into a corner table with her coffee, she opened her notebook. This was her safe space. With each stroke of the pen, her ideas transformed from fleeting thoughts into tangible goals. She mapped out a plan, outlining her strengths, her narrative, and what she could offer to the world. Her heart swelled with possibility, yet amid her newfound ambition, the lingering tension remained. A challenge lay ahead, one that needed confronting. She'd be risking vulnerability on a platform where she feared judgment and second-guessing. The first step would require her to return to the office and face her colleagues again, ready to engage in a way that could unveil the reality of her beliefs, a risky discourse that might change everything. And as that realization dawned, she knew one undeniable truth. The time had come to face the very people she feared most. Would they embrace her? Or would her voice be lost once again? Alissa sat in her corner of the coffee shop, the rhythmic tapping of her pen matching the rapid pulse of her heart. She outlined her initial thoughts with fervor, her stories, her struggles, and an emerging vision of empowerment. The notes spilled bravely onto the page, each word a step toward a future she desired. But as each line filled, a shadow of apprehension crept in, whispering doubts that swirled like the steam rising from her mug. What if they didn't understand her message? What if it failed? For a moment, she considered closing her notebook and slipping back into the anonymity of her routine. But that flicker of desire ignited within her once again. This was her moment, a chance to shatter the confines of her current identity, and establish a voice that could resonate not just within her home, but beyond. The challenge of articulating her feelings began to feel invigorating rather than daunting. The warmth of coffee enveloped her, offering a false sense of security against the chill that had begun to seep into her resolve. Closing her eyes, she envisioned the room full of her colleagues, each face reflecting a disinterest she had often felt. Yet she also imagined another scenario, a room where her words were met with nods of understanding and acceptance. She would not let fear dictate her potential. She confronted the reality of her aspirations head-on. Should she even consider an audience larger than her immediate colleagues? That possibility danced before her. A blog could elevate her voice, while a podcast could reach those beyond the confines of her workplace. This notion sparked urgency in her thoughts. As she leaned against the barista's counter and gulped down the last of her coffee, she felt an unexpected surge of determination. Returning to work wouldn't just be about stepping back into her daily grind. It would be about claiming the space for her new identity. But how could she convey the weight of her experiences? Would they take her seriously? She had spent far too long sidelining her insights, allowing others to dominate discussions. Now it was time to flip that narrative. With renewed vigor, Alissa began jotting down goals, a series of blog posts that could chronicle her journey as a single mom navigating both personal and societal barriers. She envisioned stories that would highlight the struggles she encountered alongside the triumphs. These reflections could invite others to share their own experiences, creating a tapestry of resilience that would inevitably draw the attention she craved. Her initial fears began to give way to a fiery ambition. A flicker of adrenaline coursed through her, as she imagined her first blog post, an honest narrative showcasing vulnerability, a piece that could spark conversations. What if it revealed insights she hadn't noticed? The thought resonated strongly, feeding her growing passion. Confronting the office environment wouldn't only uncover her truths. It could ignite unseen mutual struggles among her peers who felt compelled to maintain facades of perfection. As Alissa stood to leave the cafe, the chill outside no longer unnerved her. Instead, each icy gust was a reminder of her fortitude. Her heart thrummed with anticipation as the path back to her workplace sprawled ahead like a road lined with unanticipated opportunities. She had to make it clear that her dystopian narrative wasn't reality. She was more than the sum of her challenges. Each step resonated with possibility and purpose. Once inside, she took a breath to quell the rising tide of anxiety. The buzz of the office embraced her, but the walls felt weightier than before. She was no longer just a passing figure. She was a woman armed with clarity and a vision poised to break through her own invisibility. And then, with a startling realization, Alissa knew the moment was arriving sooner than anticipated. A brief impromptu meeting would be taking place that afternoon with Jason. This was her chance, her platform. Would she muster the courage to voice her thoughts in front of him, to challenge not just herself, but the standard to which she had allowed herself to adhere? The thought both terrified and exhilarated her, and she felt alive in her uncertainty. Steeling herself, she approached the door to the conference room. This was not merely about sharing her ideas. It was also about battling the very narratives that had stifled her for too long. The stakes were higher than she had anticipated, and the inner critic within her flourished under the weight of possibility. She had to confront not only Jason, but the doubts that lurked in every corner of her mind. In that very interplay between vulnerability and empowerment, she stepped forward. Would this act of courage lead her into the daylight she yearned for, or would it force her back into the shadows? Alissa stood outside the conference room, her pulse quickening as she listened to the familiar buzz of conversation inside. The chatter felt thick and heavy, almost tangible, pressing against her chest as she gripped the door handle. The reality of her aspirations collided with the weight of apprehension. Was she really ready for this? Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room fell silent, the curious gazes of her colleagues darting toward her. Jason was leaning against the table, his arms crossed, a faint smile playing on his lips as he greeted her. In that instant, Alissa felt as though she were in slow motion, everything around her blurring except for his unwavering gaze that seemed to pierce through her doubts. "Glad you could join us, Alissa," he said, his tone casual yet inviting. His easy demeanor stirred a flicker of confidence within her. She nodded, swallowing hard as she moved to the front, aware of the knot twisting in her stomach. The moment she opened her mouth, her carefully constructed words tumbled out, each syllable a mix of hope and fear. "I have some thoughts I'd like to share about our latest project," she began, her voice steadying as she steadied herself against the table for support. As she outlined her ideas, detailing the struggles of balancing her responsibilities while contributing creatively, she noticed Jason's eyes spark with interest. The seriousness she'd confront earlier ebbed away with every nod and approving glance he sent her way. The daunting walls that had once surrounded her confidence began to crack, revealing bursts of sunlight through the fissures. But a deeper conflict nagged at her. Each point she articulated was a small step toward claiming her voice, but was she truly prepared to unveil her struggles? To bear her authentic self? What if they dismissed her ideas because they came from a place of personal experience rather than professional expertise? Suddenly, she sensed a turn in the atmosphere when Jason interjected. That's a fresh perspective, Alissa. We can really utilize these insights. His words were met with murmurs of agreement from her colleagues, but it was the familiar critique lurking within her mind that persisted. Who was she to think her experiences would matter? Have you thought about how these reflections might connect to our clients? Jason continued, leaning forward, drawing her deeper into the discussion. Your story could resonate, helping them feel understood. Can you expand on that? Alyssa's heart raced as she realized the depths of understanding he was reaching for. Here was an opportunity to tap into her vulnerability for something greater. She took a moment, emboldened by the supportive energy around her. What if I could weave my journey as a single mom into our marketing approach? It would reflect our commitment to real connections with clients who share similar challenges, she proposed, words pouring out like water breaking through a dam. The room erupted with dialogue and exchange she had long dreamed of being part of. Colleagues shared their own experiences, and Alissa felt a symmetry in their struggles. She was just an outlier, but a voice resonating with shared humanity. Each response they offered fortified her confidence, building an intricate tapestry of understanding and empathy. Yet, beneath the optimism simmered a gnawing uncertainty. She had propped open a door, but how far could she venture? Was she willing to stand in her truth outside the safety of this meeting, beyond these familiar faces where judgment could lurk? As the meeting wrapped up and her colleagues applauded her ideas, Alissa felt lighter, almost as if she were floating. Yet with that weightlessness came a renewed realization of the road ahead. This moment was merely the first of many. How would she maintain this momentum? Tonight, she resolved to explore the most profound depths of her journey in her first blog post. This was just a way to share her insights. It was about challenging the expectations she had set for herself and possibly inspiring others to confront their narratives. As she walked out, her heart still drumming an exhilarating rhythm, she glanced back at Jason, who was gathered with a few others, animatedly discussing her suggestions. Did he view her in a new light? The uncertainty lingered, but didn't he suffocate her anymore? Alissa stepped outside and took in the crisp air, feeling a heady mix of vulnerability and excitement for what lay ahead. But was this newfound courage sustainable against the tide of self-doubt that often threatened to sweep her away? One thing was clear: her journey was no longer just about breaking free. It was about defining her path, far and wide. And as she prepared to write her first blog post, she sensed that the real challenge lay ahead, confronting her past while navigating this new territory of self-expression. Every word she would write had the potential to expose not just her strengths, but also her frailties. Would she embrace that vulnerability fully, or would it pull her back into the shadows? The answer loomed just beyond her reach, waiting for her brave reveal. Alissa sat on her bed, laptop propped open in front of her, fingers poised over the keyboard. The blank screen stared back at her, a daunting white canvas demanding words that felt almost too heavy to form. She had envisioned pouring her soul into her blog post, but now, with the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her, she hesitated. Writing about her life meant confronting her vulnerabilities head-on, a thought that both thrilled and terrified her. Deep breaths. She needed to anchor herself, to untangle the knots of doubt winding around her thoughts. What had sparked her courage earlier in the conference room? It had been Jason's validation, the way her colleagues had rallied around her ideas, how her voice had sparked an unexpected fire. But would that glow survive in her writing? Did her experiences carry enough weight to matter, or was she merely indulging in an exercise of self-indulgence? The questions gnawed at her, pulling her away from the momentum she had built. She opened a new document, staring at the title she had chosen, and felt a shiver. It felt misleading, a gimmicky headline that belied the depths she wanted to convey. She backspaced it, erasing the clamor as she sought clarity of thought. What if she began with the truth? The light and the darkness that came with being a single mom, the constant negotiation between aspirations and reality. My journey hasn't been easy, she typed tentatively, but it has shaped who I am today. With that first sentence, the floodgate creaked open. She began to write about the moments that had defined her late nights spent working, the quiet, desperate hopes she harbored for a better future for herself and her child, the isolation that sometimes crept in. As she typed, a revelation struck. Writing wasn't merely about sharing her story, it was about understanding her path. Moments of regret surfaced, rewriting the narrative she had held onto about not being enough. Each word she penned served as both acknowledgement and confrontation, a challenge to rewrite the script that had imprisoned her for so long. What struck her most was how closely her fears of imperfection mirrored the expectations she imposed on herself. Could she embrace the concept of being enough as she was? The idea thrummed in her mind, a melody she had silenced for far too long. This post was about acceptance, not just of her life choices, but of her entire self. Alissa paused, allowing the depth of this realization to settle in. The act of writing became liberating. Each sentence was a testament to her resilience. She confronted the rawness of her life, the chaos of juggling responsibilities with her dreams, the precarious balance of working hard while nurturing independence. Would it resonate? She took a chance, giving a voice to the unseen struggles faced by many. The clock ticked on, and as shadows deepened in the room, a chime of bells rang through her mind, echoing the significance of her task. Each keystroke was an assertion of power. By sharing her fears and imperfections, she could potentially guide others toward their own truths. After hours of pouring herself onto the screen, a thought nestled deeper inside her. What if this was the first step to something larger? What if she could turn her blog into a platform not only for personal storytelling but for connecting with others seeking solace in shared experiences? She read over her work, feeling exhaustion and exhilaration war within her. The background noise of self-doubt had been drowned out by the clarity she had uncovered. But tucked inside that revelation flickered an ember of fear. How would she respond to criticism should it come? What if her truth wasn't embraced or worse, dismissed? Steeling her resolve, Alissa hit save, denying herself the urge to go back to revise. This post was authentic. It was her truth woven into a narrative that had the potential for ripples. Yet, as she readied herself to publish, another doubt began to unfurl. Would she be brave enough to face the comments and reactions that might follow? As she prepared for bed, her heart raced with the blend of fear and anticipation. Tomorrow would bring the unveiling of her vulnerability to a wider audience. She wondered whether sharing her raw truth could empower others, and if it might shift the perception of herself she fought against daily. That night, surrounded by the quiet of her home, she realized there was little difference between courage and fear. It was the act of confronting both that defined her path. As she turned off her laptop, she grappled with an unsettling thought. What if stepping into the light invited shadows she hadn't anticipated? Would she be able to cope with the fallout? The dawn of a new chapter awaited, and the question loomed larger than ever: who would she become after her voice broke free? The morning sun poured into Alissa's bedroom, scattering light across the remnants of last night's thoughts. She stretched her arms wide, inhaling deeply, battling the weight of uncertainty that still clung to her despite the promise of a new day. Today was the day she would share her blog post, an unveiling of parts of herself that had long been cloaked in shadows. Her heart beat with anticipation, each thump echoing her mission to expose her vulnerabilities. She washed her face, the cool water snapping her into focus. There was power in vulnerability, a notion she wished to fully film inside her. As she sat in front of her laptop again, her grip tightened on the chair's edge. What if no one connected with her words? What if they dismissed her as just another single mom trying to be heard? Deep within, Alissa wrestled with that doubt, with the fear that her truth might not resonate as she hoped. She opened her blog dashboard, the cursor poised ominously over the publish button. The words she had written felt like a raw nerve, exposed and fragile. Yet they pulsated with a truth that deserved to be heard. Just as she was about to click, a message surfaced on the screen. "Are you sure you want to publish this?" "Of course I am," she whispered defiantly, yet uncertainty twisted in her stomach. This was not merely about her. It was about carving out space for others who felt invisible, unheard. With a swift motion, she clicked publish. The screen flickered, her words finally breaking free from the confines of her mind and taking flight into the vast unknown of the internet. A mixture of pride and terror washed over her. Within moments, she felt the palpable silence of her small apartment. Each minute stretched endlessly as her mind raced to anticipate the responses. Would Jason read it? Would her colleagues offer their support, or had she overstepped? The questions wove through her thoughts like strands of a web, intricate and tangled. But she resolved to embrace whatever came next. She grabbed her phone to distract herself, scrolling through social media, keenly aware of how interconnected these virtual platforms had become. Then, a notification chimed. Someone had commented on her post, a friend from her past, someone who had witnessed her transformation over the years. She tapped the notification, breath hitching as she read, "This is what we need. Thank you for sharing your truth." Encouraged, she continued reading through the comments, each one a mixture of support and curiosity, people thanking her for the vulnerability she had shown. Yet, amid the positivity, a voice echoed in her head, probing doubt. What if someone hates it? What if this only brings out the worst in people? The thought struck her hard, but she refused to let it fester. This was her opportunity to not just share, but to engage with others through their shared struggles. It could be a chance for dialogue, for connection. Fired up with determination, Alissa devised a plan. Each week, she would focus on a different topic that resonated within her post. She envisioned dedicating her platform to a series of exploration, each chapter of her unfolding life captured in words, from the trials of single motherhood to the pursuit of career ambitions. This could evolve into something meaningful, something beyond herself. Yet, just as this newfound desire crystallized within her, an unexpected twist unfolded. An email from her workplace flickered into view. A company-wide meeting had been scheduled for the following week, with a theme she had never participated in before: personal stories. Would she stand and share? The opportunity loomed just ahead, an invitation to voice her journey not just as a mom, but as a woman navigating the complex world outside her home. Alissa pondered the implications. This was a chance to step onto a larger stage, a moment that could solidify her instincts about her ability to connect through storytelling. She felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. Would she find the courage to seize it? Breathlessly, she reflected on the challenge ahead. Here lay a door to an even broader calling, yet another layer of fear awaited beyond it. As the realization washed over her, the meeting was just days away, her stomach clenched with anxiety. Would she rise to the occasion and seize this pivotal moment in her personal and professional development? The stakes had undeniably escalated, and the choice lay before her. How far was she willing to stretch her boundaries and embrace the uncertainty of growth? The days leading up to the meeting were fraught with her anxiety, each moment pregnant with self-doubt. Alissa typed and deleted her thoughts about what she might say countless times, the blinking cursor a relentless reminder of her indecision. Every time she thought she had formed a clear narrative, it would unravel under the weight of her fears. What would resonate with an audience of colleagues and a CEO at that? Would her own story feel too personal, too raw, in a professional setting? The stakes felt impossibly high. In the early morning light, she found herself going over her blog comments for the 100th time, seeking reassurance in the kind words of strangers. Their gratitude echoed in her mind, yet the nagging voice of skepticism reminded her that sharing her story could still lead to criticism. She held her breath every time someone new liked or shared her post, feeling an exhilarating blend of hope and trepidation each time. As the meeting day approached, Alissa took a deep dive into her own motivations. Why did she feel compelled to share her story? What was it she hoped to achieve by standing in front of her peers? Was it merely to showcase her journey, or to connect deeply, to inspire? Reflecting on this gave her clarity. Perhaps it wasn't about the response but about the act itself, finding strength in her truth, regardless of how it was received. On the eve of the meeting, her mind raced. She paced her apartment as if the rhythm could articulate her thoughts more clearly. She crafted an outline in her mind, focusing on the moments that had sculpted her journey, the challenges, the small victories, and the unyielding journey of self-acceptance. With each defined point, she focused less on how she'd be perceived and more on what she hoped her audience might feel. That focus felt empowering. Still, moments of doubt crested like waves. She glanced around her apartment, where the remnants of her life as a single mother were strewn about a stack of dishes, toys underfoot, laundry waiting to be washed. This was her life, multifaceted and real, layered with experiences that shaped who she was. If she was to voice it, she needed to own not only the highs but also the struggles. That night, with sleep eluding her, Alissa wrote in her journal, a tool she had often neglected but one that helped gather her thoughts. She poured out her fears, her hopes, and her failures, all spilling onto the pages. "What if I'm not enough?" echoed throughout her entries. But alongside that thought came the assertion of her journey so far. Each failure was a lesson, and each triumph was a testament to her will. She wrote until her fingers seized up, the rawness of her journey spilling onto the pages. When the morning dawned, the meeting loomed closer, and Alissa felt both dread and exhilaration wash over her. She dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that made her feel confident. However, as she drove her son to school, a knot formed in her stomach. The closed environment of the meeting room suddenly felt stifling. Would her colleagues understand the deeper layers of her story? Would they see the real woman behind it all? Arriving at the office building, she found herself standing a moment longer outside the conference room. Voices echoed within, laughter mingling with anticipation. The comfort of anonymity faded away, and as she stood on the threshold, the full weight of the opportunity pressed against her. Empowered by her reflections, Alissa decided to embrace the fear. She whispered to herself reminders of her worth, the depth of her experiences, and the stories she held that could touch others' lives. She lined the edges of her internal monologue with "I can do this." With a deep breath, Alissa stepped inside. The room shifted, all eyes suddenly pierced her, anticipating her next move. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and openness. And then, the moment of truth beckoned, drawing closer as her heart raced. Would she speak candidly about her struggles? Would she shatter the walls of professionalism and let her truth unfold? With a calmness that belied her nerves, she prepared to take that first step into vulnerability. But as the words began to form in her mind, she was struck by an unexpected realization. She was at a pivotal crossroads, not just in her professional life, but on a journey towards self-acceptance and authenticity in a broader sense. What awaited her on the other side could change everything, even the very fabric of her identity. Would her brave stance resonate, or would she face condemnation? As Alissa inhaled deeply, poised to share her story, the anticipation in the room was palpable. What awaited her beyond the words she was about to unleash? Alissa felt the weight of the moment press against her chest, constricting yet electrifying. The thought of her journey flickered to life in her mind, vivid and clear. With each beat of her heart, she reminded herself of the countless late nights spent crafting her narrative, and the emotional stakes riding on this very moment. She let the silence thicken, a deliberate pause meant to draw in her audience. As she scanned the faces before her, an uneasy realization settled in. These weren't merely colleagues but individuals who could become her advocates or her critics. Yet buried beneath the layers of doubt was a burgeoning sense of resolve, a fierce determination to own her presence in the room. Drawing from the well of her experiences, she began with honesty. "I never thought I'd be standing here, sharing these parts of myself. My path has been riddled with challenges, struggles that often felt insurmountable." With each pivotal moment she recounted, she felt the walls around her vulnerability begin to dissolve. She recalled her fears, the sacrifices, wrestling with self-judgment, and the moments of grace that punctuated her days. Her voice steadied as she spoke about her identity as a single mother, a role she assumed out of necessity yet embraced with unexpected pride. It wasn't just a label. It was a testament to her resilience and capacity to juggle multiple roles. She observed the shifts in the audience's expressions, their initial curiosity evolving into understanding as they leaned closer, engaged. Yet, amid the rising tide of empowerment, Alissa sensed remnants of the hesitation that had clung to her during the weeks leading up to this moment. What if her transparency led to a sense of discomfort? There existed an innate fear within her to be reduced to her struggles, defined by them rather than acknowledged for her growth. But just as she had mused before, perhaps it was about how she would be perceived. It was about affirming her journey. As she delved deeper, she articulated an experience that had become a linchpin in her life's narrative. The day she was forced to confront her own limitations. I realized how often I had underestimated my capabilities, she shared, her conviction growing. Only when I confronted my fears did I discover the strength I didn't know I possessed. With that declaration, waves of energy surged through her. A breakthrough was unfolding not just for her, but for the room that had quieted in rapt attention. Alissa recognized her audience's shifting dynamics. No longer mere spectators, they were participants in her unfolding narrative. She felt emboldened to challenge them too, urging each person to reflect on their hidden struggles and unacknowledged strengths. "It's easy to wear a facade," she said, her eyes darkening with intensity. "To hide behind professionalism while battling our internal fires. But what if we dared to show our authentic selves? To embrace vulnerability not as a weakness but as a catalyst for growth?" In that moment, Alissa was not just sharing her story, she was igniting a conversation about authenticity in the workplace. A subtle shift overtook the room, the tension replaced with a palpable sense of connection. No longer was she only in search of validation, she was extending a challenge that mirrored her journey, a call for transparency that could reverberate far beyond the meeting room. Even the CEO, a figure of authority cloaked in expectation, leaned forward, intrigued. There was no turning back now. Alissa's words had reached a climax, merging personal exploration with powerful advocacy. But then came the unsettling thought: what was next? What consequences awaited her after this unveiling? Was she prepared to handle the reactions, both positive and negative, that were surely forthcoming? With her heart urging her toward activation, she navigated the culmination of her message. Alissa needed to anchor herself in the very values she had championed. This was not just her story, it could propel the collective introspection of her colleagues, offering each one the courage to confront their realities. As the tide of her emotions swelled, she spoke the closing words that resonated with authenticity. "We are more than our roles. Let us explore our truths together, and let them redefine us." And with her final sentence, she felt a deep sense of release and also a wave of apprehension. What awaited her could either fortify her newfound self or challenge it further. As she sensed the stirrings of response in the room, a chilling thought confronted her. Was this just the beginning of a more profound introspection, or had she inadvertently opened a Pandora's box of scrutiny? Alissa's journey into vulnerability had just begun, with the promise of dialogues yet unfurled, each one brimming with tension and anticipation for what lay ahead. Alissa stood in the aftermath of her presentation, her pulse racing in a cocktail of exhilaration and anxiety swirling within her. She had laid bare not just her struggles, but the dichotomy of her identity as single mother striving for more in a world that often whispered that she should settle for less. The chairs around her slowly filled with murmured conversations, the weight of her words settling over the room like a soft blanket, yet leaving a charged energy in its wake. As she stepped down from the podium, Alissa could feel the eyes of her colleagues lingering on her, assessing and reevaluating their perceptions. Would they view her differently now? Would her acts of vulnerability foster deeper connections or veer into awkwardness? Each step felt heavier, the fear of scrutiny pressing down on her shoulders like a leaden coat. Her gaze caught the CEO leader, who approached slowly, a contemplative frown etched across his face. Alissa's breath hitched. What could he possibly want to say? Would he commend her courage, or would he critique her audacity? "Alissa," he began, his voice steady yet a hint of something softer beneath. That was unexpected. Her heart thudded. "In what way?" she asked, wrestling with the instinct to defend her choices. "Well, you've turned vulnerability into a strength I didn't anticipate seeing in a presentation." There was sincerity in his tone, but also a challenge. "But I wonder, what does that mean for the culture here? You've brought emotions into a space often characterized by metrics and bottom lines." His inquiry hung in the air, buoyed by curiosity yet burdened with an expectation for clarity. Alissa felt an internal flare of indignation. How could emotions be perceived as unprofessional? But deep down, she recognized the underlying truth of his words. "I believe it means that we can create an environment where people feel safe," she replied, this time holding his gaze firm. When we connect on a personal level, it not only nurtures empathy but also fosters collaboration, innovation. We can achieve more if we feel. The CEO nodded, his expression thoughtful. You've put yourself out there, Alissa. And while I'm all for encouraging authenticity, that approach can expose one to criticism. How do you plan to navigate that? A thread of uncertainty knotted in her stomach. She hadn't fully considered the shadow side of her revelation, the backlash, the judgment. Her mind raced through the faces in the room, the potential for divided opinions. I suppose, she began, that embracing feedback, positive or negative, is part of this journey. If I'm going to advocate for authenticity, I must embody that acceptance myself. Inwardly, as she spoke, she could feel cracks forming in her previous defenses, stark realities of her fears seeping through. Would she actually withstand criticism? Would her newfound voice hold true if it faced dissent? The CO's eyebrows lifted slightly, impressed yet probing. And if it cost you professional relationships? The prospect hung heavy. Alissa wanted to seize control of her narrative but felt a flicker of panic. If we can't risk losing something, how can we grow? She answered, her voice trembling slightly. The anxiety was palpable. Did she truly believe this, or was it merely bravado? An admirable outlook, he replied, and a hint of a smile cracked his otherwise solemn demeanor. Be prepared, though. Growth is often painful. I might need you to help lead this conversation further, bring the rest of the team along. Alissa felt her pulse quicken again. She was being invited to steer a movement she had only just begun to understand. Led? He raised a finger to interrupt. We can't afford to ignore the changes in the workplace, especially as we move forward into new territories of collaboration. You might just have the courage this organization needs. With the weight of his words sinking in, she realized how significant this moment was. The path she had set on was not merely about her own growth, it was about becoming a catalyst for others. Were her next steps merely about her personal journey, or did they lay the groundwork for transforming the very fabric of her workplace? Alissa's heart raced with excitement, yet doubt lingered in the corners of her mind. Could she truly lead such a venture? As she stood on the precipice of this professional transformation, a thought crashed into her consciousness. Would her vulnerabilities be a bridge or a barrier in the eyes of her peers? It was a question that demanded an answer, one that would unravel during the upcoming team meeting. A crossroads both thrilling and terrifying awaited her. As Alissa left the conference room, she felt a torrent of emotions compelling to surge forth. She had revealed herself. It was not just an act of bravery, it was a significant milestone in her journey towards self-actualization. That initial moment before she spoke, where fear collided with resolve, had unfolded into a transformative endeavor, one that she realized was about far more than sharing a story. It was about catalyzing change within herself and her workplace. Days passed, and the company embraced her initiative for authenticity, as Jason had suggested. Alissa was tasked with spearheading a new focus on vulnerability in the workplace, promoting discussions that encouraged transparency and empathy. Her confidence flourished in this new role, and it became clear that this position wasn't just a title, it embodied her newfound purpose. Alissa learned not just to lead discussions, she practiced the art of facilitating connections among colleagues, breaking down barriers that had long perpetuated isolation. In her weekly meetings, participants were invited to share their own narratives. They began to swap stories of struggles and triumphs, knitting a tapestry of shared human experience. Alissa watched the room transform before her eyes as once distant colleagues drew closer, forged with common threads of resilience. Recognizing her leadership, Jason approached Alissa one afternoon, his demeanor transformed from formality to admiration. "What you're doing here? It's changing the atmosphere of this entire organization. We've seen marked improvements in collaboration and morale," he said, a hint of pride dancing behind his eyes. It was validation that resonated deeply. "Thank you," she replied, a surge of warmth flooding through her as she accepted the praise. Alissa realized the authenticity she had begun to embody not only elevated her professional standing but also constructed a foundation for her self-worth. With that foundation solidifying, Alissa took the bold step of transforming her blog into a platform equipped to uplift others. She began to mirror her discussions in the workplace on her virtual space, inviting others to share, empathize, and overcome. She sought to engage those who felt invisible, harnessing the narratives she encountered to build a community of strength. Each shared experience echoed a commitment to uncover new strengths, accepting vulnerability in its transformative brilliance. Receiving messages from mothers and individuals inspired by her honesty buoyed her spirit. "Your story reminded me I'm not alone," one reader wrote. Each comment was a reminder of why she began sharing her journey, the call to support others who thirsted for connection amid their struggles. In a few short months, Alissa authored a thought-provoking piece on the parallel between personal reflection and professional growth, establishing herself as a voice of authenticity in her field. Opportunities to speak at conferences emerged, and she relished each moment a chance to embody the very essence of her work, one that could leave ripples of change across industries that often prioritized output over empathy. One night, as she sat in her living room surrounded by her children, Alissa reflected on her transformation. Each obstacle she faced, self-doubt, apprehension, and overwhelm, had become stepping stones toward embracing her identity fully. Today she stood at the intersection of professional confidence and personal authenticity. Alissa's journey, once steeped in uncertainty, had woven threads of accomplishment that resonated deeply within her. She fostered a work environment that thrived on connection and acceptance, while still pouring love and ambition into being a single mother. Her image transformed in the eyes of her colleagues, too. No longer just the single mom, she was now an empowered leader. As she tucked her children into bed that evening, Alissa felt the weight of fulfillment rest lightly upon her shoulders. They believed in her fight, and in that belief, she found her strength. Standing on the cusp of reaching her potential, she had not only transformed her own narrative but had begun to shatter the ceilings of expectation around her. Determined to continue her growth, Alissa knew there were even greater challenges ahead. But she felt ready, equipped with resilience, confidence, and the profound understanding that vulnerability was not a weakness but an unparalleled strength that would guide her journey forward. This is your moment. Don't wait even one more second. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that fuel growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and let others find inspiration. Comment your reactions and theories about this amazing conclusion. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of personal overcoming stories. Your support means everything.